Here are 4 biblical steps you can take as a Christian man to find your calling from God. Number 1, start big and then work your way down to the smaller details. As I talk about in my video called 3 Biblical Differences Between Your Purpose, Calling, and Career, which you can watch by clicking the card in the right corner of your screen, I talk about how these are very different things, and it's important that you know the difference between these terms. So your career is how you're going to make money, and that's something that's important, but your purpose is the reason for why you exist. And biblically speaking, all of our purpose as humans is the same, which is to glorify God. Your calling, however, is your unique expression of how you're going to glorify God. Your calling is going to be different than everyone else's calling, and it may change throughout the course of your life. You may get paid to do it or you may not, but it's the individual expression of your main purpose, which is to glorify God. So I believe it's very wise to start with the big picture and then work your way down to figure out the smaller details that God will lead you to do. In other words, get clear about your purpose before you see clarity about your calling. You need to figure out your why before God will then reveal your what. And He does that for your benefit, because if you don't understand your motive and your purpose, you're going to be led astray into false callings by a desire to do what gets you praise from people rather than from God. And so if your why is off, meaning you don't have a motive to glorify God, you're never really going to find your true calling, because you're going to have all these strings pulling you in the wrong direction for impure reasons. So how do you start working your way down? Big picture, again, you want to glorify God. And the way you do that ultimately is by imitating Jesus Christ. As you mature in your Christian walk, meaning your sanctification, you become more and more reflective of Jesus Christ in your life. Then as you get that maturity, God then allows you to walk in those more specific callings. So a good analogy of this would be a soldier who's in special forces. So you don't just sign up for the military and say, sign me up for the Navy SEAL program. What you do is you join the military and then you start at basic training like everyone else. You start by learning the fundamentals. And then as you master those skills and show potential in certain areas, then you have opportunities to get more and more training. And then you kind of branch out more and more into individualized, specialized training. So if you don't master basic training, you're not just going to jump to be a Navy SEAL. This principle of starting big and then working small can be seen in Philippians 2. In verses 1 through 11, we're told to imitate Christ. That's your main goal in life. That's your purpose as a Christian. But as an individual man, you will have to make minute daily decisions on how to actually live your life for God. So then notice what Philippians 2:12 through 13 states. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Number 2, do what needs to be done, but follow your passions whenever possible. One big mistake that men often make when they're trying to pursue their calling is that they end up neglecting their duties. So they have this idea that to really find your calling, you have to go all in, quit your job, neglect all those other things that kind of feel like your duty, and you pursue your calling full blown. They know it's a risk, but they feel like this is the path that everyone takes and this is what you have to do. So I commend the courage in this response, in this path. I commend the commitment. Those are all good things, but I do think it's very unwise, and there's a lot of problems that men find when they walk down this path. First off, it wrongly conflates your career with your calling. So a lot of guys think that to be in their calling, they need to get paid to do it. And thus they think, well, the first step is to not get paid in these other ways so that I can spend all my energy to get paid in this one way that I feel like I need to get paid so I can be walking in my calling. But again, that conflates the two, and they're not the same. Your calling and your career are not the exact same thing. They can overlap at times, but they don't need to. On a practical level, this rarely works because it gives you a very small financial window to actually pursue your calling, and it's usually just not enough time. So then after it fails, men think, well, I got to go back to my job, and thus I'm never going to find my calling. I tried and it didn't work. Another problem with this path is that for God to really give you your calling, that one that you're thinking about, that one that feels like it really suits you, you need to be more faithful in your duties, not less. If you can't go to a job that you hate and pursue your passions in the margins of life and with the time that you have outside of work, then you're never going to develop that grit and tenacity that's going to be required when God does give you that calling to walk in, because it's not always going to be easy even when you are doing exactly what you've always wanted to do. Lastly, it's just impractical and self-defeating to quit your job and go all in, because as a man, you need to be taking care of yourself. You need to be financially independent. For example, when needed, Paul was a tent maker. So most men are going to have a career that helps support their calling. And even if you do reach that place where you can make money while doing your calling, you need to fund the path to that destination. It's going to take resources to develop those skills and the time to get there, and you need to be able to fund that. So if something's really important to you, you're going to make the time. If you can't work a full-time job and pursue this passion, then you probably haven't really found your true passion. No one ever changed the world working an 8-hour day. If you're not using your Saturdays to pursue your calling, work on your passion, then it's very likely you will never actually be able to walk in your calling to the level that God desires for you. In the NLT, Philippians 2:13 states, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him." So what desire do you have? Do you love to preach? Do you love to write? Do you love to help people solve problems? Do you like working with your hands? Do you like administrating? Do you have musical passions? Whatever desires God has given you, pursue them with the power God gives you, but make sure all this is done to do what pleases Him. If you do your duty and you pursue your passion, in time, God will allow you to walk in that calling. Number 3, always do what you would do even if you never got paid to do it. What would you keep doing even if you never got paid to do it? Usually your calling is connected to that thing. If you need money to motivate you to do something, then you're not walking in your calling. And oftentimes when you do pursue that thing, even when you're not getting paid, you end up getting so good at that thing, eventually people are willing to pay you to do that for them, or they're willing to fund that ministry because they see how good you are at it and how much fruit is already being produced. But if you're just waiting for someone to come and hand you a check, you're never going to have the skill set to be worthy of receiving a check. Always do what you would do even if you never got paid to do it. And number 4, be faithful in the little, and eventually God will give you more to manage. In Luke 16:10-12, Jesus said, "One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own?" If you want to lead, you first need to know how to follow. If you want to be a business owner, you first need to know how to be a good employee. If you want to be a godly husband, you first need to know how to be a godly single man right now. One of the best ways to be led into your future calling is to be faithful in your calling right now. As the old saying goes, bloom where you're planted. You don't know the future, but God does, So follow God, and then he will lead you into that particular future that he has for you. Ecclesiastes 11:5-6 states, "As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good." Here's that other video I referenced earlier called 3 Biblical Differences Between Your Purpose, Calling, and Career. I'm Mark from ApplyGodsWord.com. Until next time, God bless.